On today's episode of The Next, our guests are Max and Adam, co-founders and co-CEOs of Telescoped. Now, Telescoped is connecting the best remote software engineers in Latin America with tech startups in the US. And this is not Max and Adam's first go-round. They were co-founders of ThriveHive, which is where I first met them. This was back in kind of the 2011 to 2019 timeframe. And they got back together on this one. Max actually has family in Latin America and is very well connected there in terms of the best talent. And meanwhile, as entrepreneurs here in the US, they saw the mismatch where the best companies are oftentimes seeking talent in the same pools, but there's these rich pools of talent in other places like Latin America, but they don't have access to them. They don't know how to assess them, and those connections aren't being made nearly as efficiently as they could be. And it's not a recruiting firm. They actually came at it a different way, where they have this invite-only community of the top talent, and then they have a bunch of signal to detect who the best talent is within that community, and they make those connections with the companies. They don't take any fee on that placement. They're not a recruiting firm. They then make it really easy for employers to hire those people and provide the benefits and the payroll. So that's where Telescope's business model comes in. And they were talking in a recent investor update about what's happening on the candidate side using AI to spam a bunch of employers, and then what's happening on the employer side using AI to filter through a bunch of these AI-generated spam applications. And in their view, it's just not sustainable, and they're using AI agents in a different way, where they're almost enabling a personal concierge that represents the candidate, and then a personal concierge that represents the employer, and then really using the agents to talk to each other to make these matches in a way that has far less slop and far less inefficiency and is much more like a surgical strike. At any rate, I thought that was an interesting topic and wanted to learn more about it. So these guys came on the show and talked to me about what they're seeing in the recruiting market, what they're seeing with offshoring, what they're seeing with AI, and how they're using agents, what they've learned along the way, what stack they're using to make this possible, what some of the challenges are, and what the future holds. Anyways, this is a great one, and I hope you enjoy it. But before we get started, I'm Jason Jacobs, and this is The Next. It's not really a show, it's more of a learning journey to explore how founders can build ambitious companies while being present for family and not compromising flexibility and control, and also how emerging AI tools can assist with that. Each week, we bring on guests who are at the tip of the spear on redefining how ambitious companies get built, and selfishly, the goal is for this to help me better understand how to do that myself while bringing all of you along for the ride. Not sure where this is going to go, but it's going to be fun. Okay, Max and Adam from Telescopes, welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks.
Hey, Jason,
Good
it's
to be
great
here.
to be here.
Yeah, I've known you guys a long time, but it's been many years since we've caught up, and I'm actually a little tiny investor in your company, although I must admit, it wasn't like, oh, like I'm so passionate about the space, or oh, their vision is genius, or it was just like I like Max and Adam and believe in them as founders. Like, I don't even need to see a deck. Like, here's just a little check so I can go along for the ride. And I saw you sent an update recently, and in it, it was talking about a bunch of areas that I'm interested in and been thinking about. One is just around recruiting and how AI is affecting the recruiting market. One is around offshore engineering, since that's a portion of what you guys do, and just what are the implications of AI on offshoring and on human engineers. And then you guys are also starting to do some interesting stuff with agents, and it was like, you know what, like, it'd be good to catch up anyways, and also it'd be fun to hear more about how Telescope is doing, since I guess technically I am an investor, albeit a tiny one. And so here we are. I'm really appreciative that you're making the time to come on and talk to me about these things.
Super excited to be here. Yeah. So where do we start?
Well, for starters, and I don't know if you want me to, since there's two of you, do I do I call on one of you, or do you wrestle over it when it comes to these questions? We'll have to see. But I'm going to start with a jump ball. What is Telescoped?
I can get started. So, Telescope is a network of the best remote software engineers in Latin America, eventually, the whole globe. And, this idea came to us because we actually traveled to Costa Rica after we had sold our prior company and talked to these amazing engineers, like people that you
Did
just
you
don't
you go
find
there?
them.
Was that a pleasure trip, Max?
It was back then. Now we'd go for pleasure and for work, and it's the best excuse to get out of Boston in a January cold winter.
Okay, so you went to Costa Rica, pleasure trip, and you thought, oh, on my vacation trip after selling my company, I'm going to talk with engineers.
Well, I happen to be from Costa Rica. I got a long-standing relationship with a bunch of people in schools, and I thought, it'd be cool to catch up with some smart kids and tell them, some of the ideas we've been kind of thinking about starting a company around. And after a few years, half of this, like again, the most talented engineers you ever spoke to were willing to quit their job and join us. And Adam and I were like, whoa, whoa, we haven't incorporated. There's no company. They don't quit just yet. But there's going to be a time and place for that. And then we came back to Boston and we ditched all the ideas and just realized there was this asymmetry in the market where like the best talent was just not getting connected with the best opportunities. And CEO groups from Techstars and MIT, everybody was just looking for talent and they just didn't know how to tap into this small pool, this networks of engineers outside of the US because it's really hard. How do you vet someone? How do you find them? And if you do find them, how do you actually test to make sure that they're trustworthy, that they're the people they say they are, and how do you actually hire them in a compliant way? And so Telescope emerged to solve this based on a trust network, which is at the core of what we're building. So the network is exclusive. You can only get in by invitation. And we use that peer signal to identify the best and strongest engineers within a community. And then the business model is basically we make it easy to hire them in a remote way. So we provide benefits, payroll, and other services to the companies that want to hire them.
Did you ever pay much attention to what Ryan Durkin was doing with the operators locally?
We did. We actually spoke with him at some point. So some parallels there for sure. Um,
Hey, he's not doing it anymore, but he was just, well, it's not published yet, but he was on the I recorded with him the other day and he was telling me about that. Yeah, and it sounds like there were some similarities. I mean, obviously his stuff was local, but
yeah, and we were like
yeah.
laser focused on remote software engineers. We were doing more like the broader, higher level hires that you want to bring on to a company. But very similar in terms of like finding the rock stars, like building teams that are highly cohesive and productive. So similar thoughts there for sure.
And we're going to dig in on that, but first I have to ask, is this the second company that you guys have founded together or number
Yeah,
two?
it is. Yeah, so we started our first company in 2011. That was ThriveHive right out of business school and built that company. We worked together for how long was it, Max? Like including post-acquisition, I don't know, was
8.
it 8 years? Yeah. And we didn't hate each other. In fact, when we left ThriveHive, that was the first thing we said. It's like, hey, we want to build another company and we want to do it together. And so
And
the
at,
goal,
at what point into Telescope did you start hating each other then?
did we start
Day
hating
two.
each other? Yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
I'm just joking.
Hate this guy.
Sorry.
No, yeah. No, it's been great. It's been awesome to build together again. I don't think it's that normal to see, and it just gives us a level of comfort with each other that, we can be so candid with each other. We can, talk about anything. We can talk about the hard stuff, the easy stuff, and it's just more fun.
So, how do you guys break down responsibilities between the two of you? I know, I mean, I know there's a broader team, but as co-founders.
Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
Max.
Yeah, so I think, historically I've always leaned closer to kind of the engineering side, the product side, and Adam's been closer to the go-to-market side. And, I think the interesting thing is even though we do have like very clear lanes, overlap in the strategy piece extensively. Like, I mean, we're talking about all sorts of stuff all day, every day, and it doesn't get old, right? Like we're always like coming up with ideas where I might have like a go-to-market idea, Adam's got like a product idea, and I think that collaboration is what makes it fun for us because we can just like kind of move across pretty seamlessly.
So, when you were coming back from Costa Rica and thinking about this market, you mentioned that there was a mismatch between the best talent and the best opportunities. What was your assessment of the reasons or root causes of that misalignment?
Yeah, I think I can take this one, Max. I mean, so we started just before COVID, right? And so when we first started, I remember in our sales deck, we actually t would talk about like why remote engineering was like a good thing because some people still objected to remote. So we thought initially, hey, this has got to be a large part of it. We also knew just from our own experience how hard it was to find people and pay them and all that, those sorts of things, right? So then fast forward, COVID happened. To remove the objection handling slide on, why remote work, right? That was out the window, especially for engineers. But what has shocked us is because we've done testing on this, how broken it still is today. If you want to hire, if somebody from outside the US, an engineer, wants to apply for a job in the US, they have virtually zero chance of even being considered. We've tested in less than 1 in 100 will even get a call back or, an email back, let's say. And these
And is
are
this
this.
even for jobs where they're open to remote employees?
Yes, yeah. This is like we've done tests where they're open to remote, and we've tested this with emails that we could monitor so we could see the responses. And these are some of the most incredible engineers that, under our normal process, they do 3 interviews on average to get it hired, right? The same person won't get a call back more than 1 in 100 times. And so I think at the end of the day, they apply for these jobs and they just get put in the too hard pile. I mean, like hiring managers are completely crushed with resumes right now. And you get this resume, it starts off with like personally identifiable, like, or stuff you're not supposed to disclose. I'm married and I'm this age with 3 kids. You don't recognize the university. You don't recognize any of the companies. You don't even know where the country is, maybe if your geography isn't that good. You're like, I don't know, too hard, right? Like, how am I going to talk to this person? Like, I don't, so that's our assessment. But at the end of the day, of course, we don't know for sure, but that's what we see. And the reality is it's really still totally broken. The only way that seems to work for these engineers to get good access to high quality projects is to work through outsourcing firms. The problem with that is that then their future is with the outsourcing firm because you've got this whole middle layer of management that creates all kinds of problems. So they can literally be working for Facebook, but they don't have any stock options. Their career trajectory is completely different because they're doing it through an outsourcing firm. That's what we're trying to fix by connecting them better and paying them in a way that, there's no career for them at Telescope. Their career should be with the company that they're actually coding for.
And when you first set out, what was the initial hypothesis for how you would address that mismatch? And then what was right about that? What was wrong about that? And how has it evolved over the last several years?
Yeah, I can take this one. So I think that
So are you guys just
the
going to alternate? Is that the
Yeah,
rhythm?
dude, we've been doing
Yeah.
this a long time.
he can finish my sentences if you want.
Well,
No, so
we're
I
just
think
gonna mess with Jason. We'll change it up, and yeah.
yeah, perfect. Yes, I think at the core of it, why do you go with an outsourcing firm, right? The first thing is you have like recognizable brands. You've got somebody that you can go and chase if things don't go well, and I think it comes down to trust, right? How do you trust an individual? It's really hard. And so that's at the core of the Telescope network is this concept of trust, which I mentioned briefly in the intro. This signal between peers. You probably know from your Runkeeper days, like, oh my God, she was the best at fill in the blank. And this other guy was like the best at fill in the blank, right? You know who those people are? And what if you could capture that inside of a community, inside of a network? We've kind of an inspiration from the PageRank algorithm from Google, where a big node that has a lot of weight probably has much more influence on telling us who the best engineers are if we already know that this person is highly regarded by the network. And so we're using this trust rank algorithm to identify the top stars. And this was from inception. We knew this was going to be important, the idea of peer signals. Then the second part is, how do you take an industry where the business model is misaligned with any sort of startup work, right? Like as a startup founder, I hated, writing a check for like $40,000 to recruit someone. So what we did is like no upfront costs, no big recruiting fees up front. What we changed it is into a recurring revenue stream, which is a partnership. Now you get to interview these people directly, make a determination how much you want to pay them, and out of however much you end up paying Telescope, you know exactly how much goes to the engineer, what's going to pay for benefits, what's going to pay for the payroll services, and so forth. And so you can actually have this direct relationship. So you break the model by turning it on its head. And then the last piece, which I think is also non-obvious and important, we actually are engineer-centric. So we're trying to change the careers and the lives of these engineers. And by focusing on the talent, on the most important part of the network, we actually end up becoming a much better solution for the companies because they want the best engineers. Like the people in the Telescope network are not on Upwork or like they're not freelancers. They actually want a stable job. They want to be part of a team. They want to work on the best and most interesting challenges with amazing teams. They don't want to just do like a 3-week project.
So I think it's interesting. So you framed it that you're not an outsourcer, But technically, are you still an outsourcer, but just, kind of an outsourcer that puts engineers first and provides them a career track? And but from a business model standpoint, are there are there differences from a structural standpoint
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
outsourcers?
The
Yeah.
best way to understand it is we're not an outsourcing firm because they don't have a career path with Telescope. It's like JustWorks or any of the payroll companies here in the US that do your PEO services. They're not your company, right? Like they're just running payroll on behalf of your company. So that's what we do. And that's the basic parallel, which just breaks this concept of like an intermediary. We're just doing the logistics for you.
Got it. And when you say a career with the outsourcing firm, as opposed to what? Like in the outsourcing model, what does that path look like?
So in the outsourcing model, you have a boss at the outsourcing firm, right? Your boss and your outsourcing firm set your pay, and then the outsourcing firm marks it up, typically double, can be even higher, right? And that's what they charge the client. All kinds of problems arise from that. For example, let's say the engineer who's been working for 2 years on a project wants to get a raise. They have to ask their manager at the outsourcing firm, and the outsourcing firm will usually say, well, okay, but I have to consider this with the client. I don't know if the client can afford that right now. It becomes this whole question of, is the outsourcing firm willing to accept a hit to their margin? So you have these sort of like misaligned incentives. The client maybe has no idea any of this is going on. The outsourcing firm then loses the engineer because the outsourcing firm, let's say, doesn't agree to this raise. Meanwhile, the client just all of a sudden loses their best engineer, and they didn't even know anything was going on, right? There's just all these sort of externalities that happen there. The outsourcing firms end up getting access to the best projects, so that's why, and they provide a stable environment for the engineers. So, that's where the best engineers end up eventually. But what they really would want is a more traditional working relationship where their boss is at the company that they're coding for. If they want to get a raise, they've got to deal with the person that they're coding for, right? It's just more aligned, giving them a better career path. They can give stock options. An outsourcing firm could never do that.
So I'll ask a slightly different question then. How does the telescope model structurally compare to a PEO or a JustWorks?
I mean, it's really the same. Pay a percentage, in this case with Telescoped, of the money that is going to Telescope gets paid, then we pay the engineer, and we take a percentage of the payment to pay for payroll services, most importantly, benefits, and of course, some for our profit.
Couple of changes too is that one, we do provide the talent, so we've got this network that the client gets access to, right? Which in a ADP or JustWorks you would never get the talent. But then the other piece is that the percentage we take is much smaller because we're thinking of higher volume, more automated. Because I mean, at the core of this is how do you scale trust, right? Which where we started, and what we've built is very scalable in terms of this peer signal can be scaled within a community and within multiple communities, so you can actually have much higher volume even if the margin is much smaller. Like we're not even close to like the 2x markup that Adam was talking about on our take rate, and yet we can scale that at a much higher volume and still make a very large business work.
And so is that the type of client that you target, ones that hire a lot of people?
It doesn't have to be. I mean, we've got tons of companies that we work with that have just a single engineer with us, and then we have many that have more, of course. We tend to skew a little bit smaller on the tech company side, because what we find is once a tech company has a dedicated recruiter in-house or external, doesn't matter, we become a threat to that recruiter, and so they tend to not want to work with us, even though we of course can. We kind of remove a lot of the need to have that recruiter for a company. So if they've already made that commitment before they started working with us, then it's harder for us to get our foot in the door.
We really go from seed all the way through Series B or so. So it spans the gamut depending on size of company.
And we have like unicorns that are clients of ours too. It's just less common.
Uh-huh. And so when you go in, are you competing with the outsourcers or with the PEOs, or are you creating a new category of spend?
Well, we typically compete with the existing pipeline, the recruiting pipeline, right? You might have an ad out there on your website. Maybe you have one through your venture capital firm. You probably publish it on LinkedIn or some other places. But we're just, our engineers are going to compete on an interview process against anybody remote, both US as well as global.
Yeah, that's one thing to note. When we work with people, we always tell them, run your whatever process you wanted to run, post your job and, LinkedIn, whatever. That's fine. We don't work on an exclusive basis. We'll just run in parallel to that. And because we have a lot of confidence in our process, it's very efficient. It's more efficient for the hiring manager than any process I've ever seen. And the people that we're producing, that we're, highlighting for these companies are extremely hard to impossible for them to match on their own, particularly when they're young companies and not with a well-known brand.
And have you ever had requests for the companies to run people through like for you to take people on your paper that you
Yeah,
didn't provide?
Yeah,
yeah,
we've done that.
yeah. That happens too. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think the natural place then to shift to is the how, because you keep talking about this trust and how it's your core differentiator. So I'd love to understand how it works, but also like how you started it, because I would imagine there's a big chicken and egg there that you have to find a way to navigate when you're getting it off the ground. So yeah, maybe talk a bit about how it works and also how you got here.
Yeah. So we started this with the idea that we wanted to be in control. We didn't want to follow the classic venture capital model. So we raised a very small round, actually, with a bunch of people that we trusted, and we wanted to, stay in touch. So to have these conversations, right? You mentioned earlier, a small check. We have a bunch of those small checks, but we just raised a small amount early on, and that was it. We really wanted to bootstrap it, but wanted the access to, amazing people. And to do that, we said we're going to build an agency, learn how it's done manually. And so that was the inception of Telescope. Everything was manual, no software, no automation. And then as we learned, because we were new to the industry, right? So we learned, we started building out the network. We did have some advantages. I mentioned I'm from Costa Rica. I knew like the head of electrical engineering at some of the best school, very large public school. And so we had like these people we already had worked with, and we had this kernel to get started with community, right? These people we met and had beers with. But as we started scaling, we actually got very lucky with timing. So our first placement was in February 2020, and then a month later, we're all in lockdown. People are going nuts to find remote engineers and to understand how to make remote work. While we've been thinking about it for, for like a year at that point. So we scaled up. We got to break even. I'd say by the end of that year, we were already at break even, and then started just building all the automation behind what we were doing to run a very efficient service business, right? It's like a tech-enabled service at that point. And I don't know if you remember our deck, but we had like these three phases of the company. Phase one is manual agency. Phase two is transition. Phase three is we're actually going to automate and build a high volume marketplace. So fast forward to today, we actually, scaled that business. We've got a pretty streamlined kind of automation on the operation side. But then, I don't know, probably the middle of last year, this like AI train hit us, and we shifted the whole company strategy to make AI core to the experience. So now we've been working on kind of an agentic system. We're going to dive into kind of how we're thinking about it at the core of the Telescope experience. So we've got our network, and the way that you tap into the network is through a recruiting agent on the hiring side and through an engineering coaching agent on the engineering side. And I think that's unlocking some really interesting kind of dynamics again, happy to chat more about. But that's basically the story. I think, Adam, did I miss anything?
No, I mean, I think it's taken time for our reputation to grow, but now that reputation is a tailwind for us, and we're just seeing more and more
Well,
people come to the network, without us
actually,
doing anything.
that's interesting. So at the beginning, we were like literally Adam and I were like interviewing every engineer who joined the network. You could only get in through an introduction, a referral from somebody that we knew, and then we would have a conversation, we'd have a technical interview, we'd have like take-home tests, like a whole slew of like, how do you get somebody certified? And then over time, we started figuring out like, signals and things we could do to actually minimize the amount of manual work. And we're at a point where we're very confident in this trust rank algorithm we're running in terms of the quality of the people we've got in the network. And then the network is large enough that it's also kind of self-sustaining. We run community events in person. We've got, probably about 100 people that attend each one of those. They always sell out, and they're probably one of the most highly regarded events. We're very strong in Costa Rica. And that's where, we built a really strong brand as well. So we attract some of the best talent there already.
And Max, you mentioned that an AI train hit you. What did you mean by that? Did you see it more as an opportunity or a threat? And in what ways was it an opportunity, and in what ways was it a threat?
Yeah, great question. So I think that, we were pretty early on the, okay, so this GPT thing can be used in ways that are, pretty obvious. We've got a PDF that's a job description. We can take that and parse it. So we're applying like, basic LLM stuff to PDFs and some of the other parts of the workflow. Again, just automating the simple stuff. But then as the agentic stuff started to pick up steam and started to shape up, it was clear to us that, the whole recruiting function was going to be rewritten, right? The idea of like the job of a tech recruiter, cold calling and using tools to spam more and more engineers, engineers using AI to spam companies. Like if you're an engineer today, you can for like $10 apply to 1,000 jobs. You don't read the job description. You've got a personalized cover letter, personalized resume, and you don't even know what you're applying to. So then as you get responses, you might think through, oh, I actually want to go to this one and that interview and this interview. And that's why there's like this kind of spam war going on. On the receiving end, the recruiters will use an AI filter to get rid of all the crap, right? And so it's like AI is just enabling more and more spam to happen. And then we thought, okay, so if that's the state of the world, how can we use this AI in a way that's more conducive to creating value and high quality connection between humans? And again, this AI agent train kind of just is like that's the answer, right? Like imagine that you can have an AI work with the engineer to understand where they are in their career, what are their aspirations, who they aspire to be when they grow up. Do you want to be the CTO, the founder of a company? Do you just want to be a staff engineer who's heads down working with the coolest gadgets and technologies? And once you understand that, and by the way, that engineer coach agent never forgets a thing, right? They know exactly who you are, where you are, they keep track of you, they can check in on you, they know how much you're making, they can tell you, hey, you should actually be making twice as much as they're paying you, there's this opportunity here. And then on the other side, there's the AI recruiting agent who can talk to companies and understand where the gaps are, who the companies are looking for, what are not only the technologies, but the type of people that would succeed in a role. So it's basically automating the whole sales process end to end that we had done manually. It was just, again, like an aha moment where we thought, like, okay, an AI agent can actually take these two things and automate them in a way that is going to be better than the humans.
Adam, anything to add?
Yeah, no, just that I think, we think we're in a unique position to have these agents communicate with each other because we have both sides of the network. And so by doing that, the experience for both sides can be so much better. Instead of getting, spammed on your phone by 1,000 recruiter agents, trying to sell you a job, instead of recruiters looking at hundreds or thousands of resumes and using AI tools to do it, but um, the recruiter can just have a few conversations. We only have to bother a couple of engineers for each job, right? Because their agent can represent them without external communications to the engineer. So you're making a better decisions with fewer human touch points that arrive at better matches, better outcomes for both sides. And
I
and I
think
think that's pretty unique.
I think there's a good analogy here. If you've ever read one of these books on negotiation, where, when you bring more value and more knowledge to a negotiation, there's a better outcome for both sides. So I think instead of having the recruiting process be a combative one where like you're trying to spam as many jobs and the recruiters are trying to spam as many engineers, what if you turn it into a collaborative one where of course the objective function of the recruiter agent is to find the best engineer for the job, and the objective function for the coaching agent is to find the best next job for your career path and optimize for the engineer, right? But if you have those two agents collaborating, then because it can be done at scale, like a human could never keep track of this, and all the matching algorithms that are out there just don't work, right? But if you have two agents that are actually interacting and collaborating around those two different objective functions with, again, context and memory that is just infinite, or well, close to infinite, then you can actually end up with much better outcomes on both sides, where the companies tap into people they could have never gotten any other way, and the engineers find jobs that are just the best jobs that they've ever could have dreamt of. And then the outcome of that is just better productivity, happier employees, better company outcomes, which then is full circle, right? These engineers are part of these companies. They have hopefully financial windfalls, and they'll go and do it again, right? So it's just a completely different paradigm from what you could do manually.
So I get the story of it. I'm curious when it actually became time to dig into the best way to make that story a reality, what tools to use, whether to be off the shelf, to build it yourselves, what skill sets you needed,
We just
etc.
asked.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What did that journey look like? what did you learn along the way? What kind of stack did you end up with? And then how, if you take this point in time snapshot, how's the reality doing versus the pie in the sky vision of where things are heading?
Awesome. Let me take the first part of this, Adam, and maybe you can
Yeah, no,
add
you
later.
should. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that, the first thing is, well, we just asked ChatGPT and it gave us the answer, right? No, I'm just kidding. It's still a work in progress, right? Like this thing is so early. It's insane, right? We started, like I said, pretty early applying just basic LLM to, a very straightforward workflow. Like the classic is like take a PDF and extract, technologies. Like that's pretty straightforward. Then it was, okay, we've got these thousands and thousands of interview notes from all the certification processes we've done. What if we could have that be accessible to an agent that can actually answer questions about an engineer without you having to talk to them beyond the resume, right? So the resume gives you pretty basic information, but what about that story behind the engineer, who they are, who they want to be? So that was okay. Let's apply an agent to this context, and that was just straight up again. Just use Claude, I mean, we've tried all of them, but we're actually using Claude right now for that specific job, right? And that's live on the site. You go in, you upload your job description. We're gonna match you with the top three matches that are part of the Telescope network, and then you can chat with that resume or that engineer. But you're not chatting with the engineer; you're chatting with the agent that represents the engineer. So all of this is live. As we were building all of this, it took probably 10 times longer than you'd think it'd take, because you look at this like I don't know, we're big fans of Crew AI. We've tried LangChain, we've tried all of these little things that when you look at the tutorial they show you the happy path where like it's a single threaded idea and you just implement it with like 3 clicks and a prompt, right? When you actually try to get this into production, everything is broken. All the frameworks are half-assed, the documentation is out of date, and nothing works. And then you're like, I'm just an idiot, we don't know how to do it, and we just better go ask people that are doing it. And you go ask, and everybody's facing the same challenges. And I think I was just today at a workshop at MIT around building AI agents. Like, this is just like blockchain in the early days. Nothing works, everything is half broken. But when you actually get something to work, it's amazing, right? And so I think that for us, the interesting thing has been it's really inefficient, and it's a bet that we can only make because we own our own destiny. Like, I don't have to report at the end of the month to Jason, hey, here's like how the profit is doing. We don't, right? We are owners of our own destiny. We've got a company that is
I keep
self-sustaining
waiting for those reports. They don't come.
and never come.
Yeah, you're gonna be
We've
waiting
got
for a while.
infinite. We've got infinite time in a sense, right? Obviously, like the clock is ticking because this is moving so fast. But at the same time, we've turned time into a strategic advantage for the company. And I think if you're trying to bootstrap, that should be one of your core goals. When you can have time be a strategic advantage, then you can iterate. And if you have to toss, 10 frameworks and 10 models and rebuild it and make no progress for a month, and then all of a sudden you have a breakthrough, then that breakthrough sets you apart. Because everybody says they're doing this sort of thing, nobody has it in production, right? If you go to Telescope today, you can actually experience it, which I think is pretty unique. But I don't know, Adam, if you want to add, I've said a bunch of
Yeah,
different
just I,
things.
I think we're also using this stuff a lot on the go-to-market side. There are tons of implications with AI, that of course. And what we're actually doing right now, we have this internal debate about build versus buy, because sort of like, I don't know, I'd call it the first generation of these agentic tools are sort of showing up off the shelf, right? And so we're currently using one of those off-the-shelf solutions for a chunk of our go-to-market stack. We're simultaneously building competing and or complementary go-to-market tech ourselves. And we're trying to see which one is going to be better, which one is going to meet our needs. It's probably going to end up being a combination. And there are a couple of things that are fascinating. It's completely rewiring how I think about who our next hire should be. It becomes a question of, okay, well, I thought I needed a marketer, but now I don't know if that's true. Maybe what I need is an operations person. Our head of operations has ended up having a perfect skill set that's aligned with this to build these tools in ways that I think would be less intuitive to a marketer. But the
What's
operations
his, what's
person,
his, what's that person's skill set? The head of operations.
he loves accounting, he loves data, he has
Industrial
a
engineer.
he's an industrial engineer. And so he loves tinkering with this stuff and he's able to quickly spin up new models. Now, what he lacks is the marketing context, right? he wouldn't be able to do this on his own necessarily with the same efficacy. So there's some balance there, right? And I don't have a perfect answer. I think you're going to need both still, but there's a role for people that I never would have like. I think you're going to end up being higher, like you'll have more of these operations type people in your company than you otherwise would have at, an early stage. The other thing that's happening is we're trying to find the right balance between what to use agents for and what to still, hard code ourselves. On the one hand, we can use this operations person who's not an engineer to build really cool stuff, but I can give you but it might be way less efficient and way more expensive to run. The benefit is he can do it without involving our engineering team. The downside is, so we built this scraper, for example, and, the first time he ran it, it's costing like 12 cents per scrape. We ran it with a different model, 50 cents per scrape. And he was able to build it himself, right? But if we did this programmatically with engineering resources, it would take more time to build that tool, which we don't even know if we're going to end up using or not, but it would be like, 1/1000th of a cent or something to run it. So it's interesting to figure out, way you should build this stuff. There's a balance there.
Well, as you guys were talking, I mean, it triggered a bunch of stuff, and I actually took a few notes, so I didn't lose any of it. So I'm just going to go in order. One is when it comes to outsourcing. I mean, it seems like there's a push, at least here in America, almost anti-globalization. U.S. jobs, bring manufacturing home, all that. Are there any implications with that trend on the global stage as it relates to remote or not just remote, outsourcing in other countries?
I mean, that's not something that we've seen. Certainly, and it could just be the part of the world that we inhabit, tech, and we haven't seen any change at all in the behavior of people
I
wanting
think
to hire.
it's just capitalism, right? Like we got like somebody who you could swap out for like the best engineer in Silicon Valley or New York or Boston for half the price. Like it's just you got to make the most with your limited dollars, and everybody's gonna try to maximize the output there. I think if there were some sort of like taxation or something that happened on top of remote work, that might change, but that's not the case.
And you guys are seeing firsthand how AI is giving you meaningful leverage, and you could presume that your clients have or will be discovering similar. As AI continues to mature, what do you think the implications will be on the need for human engineers, if any?
Yeah,
Do you want me to go,
you can
Max?
go. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
So
That's a lot
I
of
want to
thoughts.
hear your take too, but all right. So we're very,
I thought you. This is a good test if you guys
yeah.
finish each other's sentences.
I mean, we're big believers in the power of AI. I believe that at some point humans will not need to work at all, that everything will be effectively free with AI powered robots, AI powered software doing any job, blue collar, white collar, whatever, that we want them to do. I think work will become optional. I think there are a whole bunch of implications of that, depression, like sense of purpose. I think lots of people will choose to work, lots of issues. But I'm a big believer that we're going to get there. So when you look at, okay, do we still need engineers? Do we still need marketers? Do we still need salespeople? Like ultimately, I don't think we're going to need any of those people. What's the exact timeline? I don't know. And what we're seeing on the ground is, yeah, engineers can build more stuff. I have never met a software founder who ran out of ideas of stuff to build, right? It's always the opposite. You have this big vision. Oh God, it's going to take us 2 years to build this out with X number of engineers, right? Salesforce, they've been around since what, 2000, 25 years old. They have thousands of engineers. They have it's just a CRM. Of course, they've got more stuff now too, but like, what could they possibly be working on still? But they are. There's always more to build. So I think it's going to be a while before we're not going to need engineers. I think that, yeah. I don't, Max, what would
Max
you
is
add to
ready to
that?
go. He was just
Yeah,
waiting there patiently, like busting
yeah.
out of his seat, ready to answer
Well,
this.
He's
the thing
wrong.
that
He's wrong.
Yeah.
the thing that you will learn from us is that when Adam's talking, I always have a lot of my best ideas.
Ideas. Yeah. Yeah, he's good like
So
that.
I think that, the first thing is what you were saying, Adam. There will be an explosion of software getting built. So it's like when you have something that all of a sudden becomes more available, you're gonna have 100x the software getting built. Like your little corner store shop is gonna have software that's custom built for them. The manufacturing store is gonna have, or factory will have software that it's just too expensive to build. To like it was like at the bottom of the roadmap. So if you have like all of a sudden the capability of writing much more software, then more software will be written, right? What changes is I think the role of the engineer is going to be different. It's still going to be a systems thinker, somebody who can design and understand the nuance of a problem. It's going to be, assisted by AI in terms of defining the problem and what is the spec and whatnot. But you're still going to have like a human running the show for a very long time. As much as I'm an AI optimist and believe that a lot of the jobs will be gone, I don't know that I go all the way through like, no jobs at all, right? I still think that the creative spark of a human can play a role in creating value. But I think the software engineer is going to be a different role where, like, instead of writing code, you are describing exactly what is it that needs to be built, and the coding machine, the AI coding machine, will code it for you, and then it'll come up with a plan for the testing, and then the AI testing machine will test it for you, and you're going to be able to do like 10 times as much as you were able to do 100 times in a few years later and 1,000 times later. But all of that software will be consumed. So it's not like there's going to be less demand for software. I think it's the opposite. There's going to be more demand. So those jobs are just going to change and shift. And I think if you're an engineer, instead of focusing on making your JavaScript game a little stronger and becoming like a better web developer, you better focus on better systems thinking, better systems design, more infrastructure stuff. I think the low level stuff is always going to be harder, right? Like it's going to be later that it gets taken over. I actually did a LinkedIn post on this earlier today. But I think engineers will always have a job, right? Like solving problems. There's always problems to be solved. It's just the tools change.
And you guys talked about AI agents on the company side and AI agents on the candidate side. What about AI agents to be writing the code for you in house? I know that several founders that have come on the show, including some that like Scott Weller, have talked about these agent armies that they're building out internally. I'm just curious if that's something that you guys have experimented at all with or are thinking about directionally.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we use Cursor. Like all of our code is like essentially all the code is already written by an AI, right? It's just that we've got a computer science major on the driver's seat to make sure that it doesn't hallucinate the wrong way or do the thing that it shouldn't be doing and whatnot, and that it pieces together with our bigger code base. I think over time, more and more of that will be feasible. Right now, we're using it for small prototypes, for things that I want to pick up, and I haven't coded in 20 years. Like I can now do stuff that I couldn't do a couple of years ago, but I wouldn't call those like production ready things that I would launch. We've got a couple of prototypes, and back to like the 5 cents versus 50 cents, or that spectrum, right? If we're testing something out, we're happy to do it in a kind of more haphazard way using some of these coding agent tools. At least for us, they're not ready for prime time just yet. They will be very soon, though.
And I guess this follow up question, it kind of reminds me of like the Starbucks barista. Like I always wonder, do the Starbucks baristas drink a lot more coffee than a regular person? And so I'll ask you the same question about, because you have this network that you keep talking about and the trust, and who the stars are and everything. Like, do you end up eating your own dog food as it relates to your own internal development? Do you hire from within that network?
Yeah. Yeah, more half of the team is in Costa Rica, and it's a good excuse. Like I was saying earlier, we do travel there often, and it's just again amazing to work with these people. They're incredible.
The biggest challenge is keeping Max from hiring them all. He just wants to hire them all. Like, we gotta
I do.
hire this guy. We've never even seen anybody like this before. Like, Max, we can't, we
It's every
can't.
other week we see somebody who's even more amazing than the prior week. So I want to hire them all, really.
And when you look towards the future, I mean, is it going to stay this kind of tight, focused approach that you've been describing? And there's a lot of headroom there. And so you'll do that for as far as the eye can see. Would you expand in some ways? Like, how do you think about the future, and what does Telescope look like in its most ambitious form?
Yeah, I can take that. So we do eventually see this network being global. We want to focus on software engineers, but we do eventually want it to be global. It's a very pro engineer network that solves a lot of the problems that LinkedIn never solved for engineers. Engineers generally hate LinkedIn. And so ultimately on the network side, that's where we want to go. I think our approach with agents is then going to enable us to scale our go-to-market in a way that will be massively efficient in a way that we couldn't have done prior to it. And so we want to be the best place to find software engineers on the internet.
Max, anything to add?
Yeah, I think that the interesting thing is also the impact that we can have. We already see it locally. We've moved, tens of millions of dollars into an economy that gets to see the upside of those dollars getting spent locally. If you have a big, not an outsourcing firm, but actually like a multinational company that sets up a large operation. I mean, in Costa Rica, you've got Amazon, Akamai, IBM, Microsoft. Well, guess where all those profits go, right? They go back to the home countries versus in our case it's going directly to the individuals, so you're like skipping that middle layer, which I think is pretty unique and impactful. So I think, again, fast forward a few years and we're wildly successful. I want to see the impact of Telescope not just in Costa Rica but all of Latin America, and like Adam was saying, the rest of the world, because there's no reason for this to not scale outside of Latin America.
I know that your focus is software engineering for as far as the eye can see. Do you think that the innovation that you have uncovered and implemented with this trust network has applications in other areas of expertise beyond software engineering?
It's a great question. I think, if you had asked us this question a year ago, we would have said like, no, it's software engineering only, and it's the only way that, we can keep it true. I think actually AI is the reason why the answer is changing, right? Once you can automate the certification process, the conversations, once you can automate some of the other things that are nuanced around a vertical, which is what makes us so special, right? Like we can truly identify the best engineers in the world, but we actually see a path to expand that to other verticals where before I don't think we did. Well, TBD, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I could almost envision like a licensing model where it's not for you guys to go after, but you can power other founders applying it in other places.
Yeah, I mean, we've spent a lot of time thinking about that, and as Max is saying, I mean, it's not necessarily something we can do out of the box today, but a lot of what we've built and discovered is absolutely applicable to other industries.
Uh-huh. And before we started recording, you guys mentioned that the how do I work different piece of my journey is also relevant to you guys. I mean, I'm probably a little older than you guys, but we're somewhat similar age. I'm just curious, in what ways is that relevant, and how are you guys thinking about, I don't even know the words, like whether you call it work-life balance or culture of Telescoped, or, how do you work and how do you envision working and the team working directionally?
Yeah, I'll start, and you should definitely fill in Max with what I miss. But this is really, really important to us. And before we even went down to Costa Rica, and before we had any ideas really of what we wanted to build, we started with how we wanted to build and what we wanted the company to look like. This was pivotal to all of those early conversations. And what we landed on is we wanted to build something. Our last company got acquired. It was great for a lot of different people. But when you get acquired, it's not, you went through that too, Jason. It's no longer your baby, right? Like it's not yours anymore. You literally sold it. And not that that's a bad thing, but we wanted to build something that we would be okay doing for a long period of time. That might not happen. We could sell the company, we could close whatever. Anything could happen, but we wanted to be okay building something for a long period of time. And we wanted to have, with that long vision, control, which meant bootstrapping. And we wanted when you're setting up that scenario, 10, 20 years, that's a marathon. That's not a sprint. In my experience, it's not sustainable to do that without, I've got 3 kids. Am I just never going to see them when they're growing up? Like that doesn't make any sense to me, right? So it had to be done in a way that could balance work and life, if you want to use that cliche. And I think we've stayed true to that. I don't know what you'd add, Max.
Yeah, I think maybe the only other thing is, as we leaned hard into remote work, there's a flexibility, but it only works when there's accountability and when you're actually like outcomes based, right? I mean, I don't care if you spend an hour or 10 hours working on this, like what matters is the outcome. But we do have this very long time frame as how we're thinking of the business. And I think once we turn that into an advantage, it just changed the way we think of how we operate internally. And we do value and cherish that flexibility, right? We've both got young kids. We want to be healthy. We want to be able to run this thing not tomorrow or the day after, but for the next many, many years as we build it into a multi-billion-dollar company. And so to do that, you just have to have those core values pretty, you got to be true to those core values.
Yeah, and I mean, just going back to that point about the concept of time, we're not the first ones to try to create a new type of network for software engineers. This has been tried a number of times before. Venture-backed models, they've all flamed out, right? They've basically not been able to achieve product market fit before they ran out of money. And, we didn't want to run that risk. And so we figured by enabling ourselves to have more time, it upped the chances of finding product market fit, go to market fit, all those types of things. And so far that's proven to be the case.
Yeah, that resonates with me a lot. That I think we grew up being conditioned that in order to be ambitious, you needed to have this compressed, go big or go home mindset. But I've come to believe, I mean, that's certainly one way, but that in some instances, having the flexibility of time gives you the ability to ride the swings in a way that you're controlling your own destiny such that you can not quit, where if you're on the venture path and it doesn't time right, then you can't get the next round of funding and you're burning money and you have no choice but to stop playing, right? So,
Right. And,
yeah.
and I think like part of that was early on, I think a lot of us either lied to ourselves or were genuinely convinced that our SaaS companies were winner take all markets. I remember I worked at HubSpot very early on, and I remember hearing, I can't remember if it was Dharmesh or Brian, talking about how they felt that they were in a winner take all space, right? And that's why we've got to go fast because whoever gets there first is going to take the whole market. And of course, like that ended up being completely untrue. I think HubSpot has thousands of competitors, right? And so, in fact, most of the areas of internet software businesses have not been winner take all markets. And so I think we sort of lied to ourselves thinking that that was the case and that that was why we had to run. Because if it's a winner take all market, then yeah, the dynamics are going to be different. But I don't think it has to be.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm thinking too. It's like, well, the space is fragmented, and how big can it really be? And well, like if you capitalize it accordingly, it doesn't need to be really big, or you can take what you learn in this space and you can go tackle an adjacent space with the same criteria, or you can add other layers on the stack once you have a base that's secured and well oiled, or who knows? But
Right, right. I mean, and we want to build a multi-billion-dollar company. That is still our goal. But if we get to a point where it's only going to be $100 million company, that'll be okay because we've capitalized it appropriately so far. And that we're not opposed to VC. We would take VC if we got to a point where we felt we were in a scenario that was going to be really important to the future of the company. But unless we feel like we're in that situation, we don't want to feel like we have to take VC.
I
We
think
want
the
to
other
do it
thing
on
that
our own
comes
terms.
the thing that comes into play here is the Adam and I have built, two mission-driven companies where what we're doing is like the actual end goal is really important to us, and I think that changes the dynamic as well, right? Because if you're doing something that you truly believe in, and it's 2 years, great. If it's 5 years, great. If it's 10 years, amazing. If it's 20 and you've like really solved it, like best outcome ever, right? Versus if you're just trying to, make a quick buck, build something 2 years, burn out and flip it, that's a completely different mindset. And I think it's kind of like depends on how you're wired and what you're trying to accomplish. But for us, we're in a pretty unique position that we could take control of how we wanted to build this thing. We did it in our own terms. And for us, all of these things mattered.
well, great guys. Well, I'm so glad you made the time to come on. Is there anything I didn't ask that you wish I did, or any parting words for listeners?
Yeah, I think, how can the audience help us? If you've got a need for an
Yeah,
amazing
I was gonna
remote
add that one after.
engineer.
Yeah, yeah.
No, seriously, if there's any companies out there that, are looking for remote software engineers and have a hard time finding, the quality of talent that they want, we're more than happy to help. And like we said earlier, there's like no upfront risk, there's no upfront payments. We'll just match you with amazing people, have them wow you in an interview, and then we'll help you get them hired. Telescope.com.
Adam, anything?
No, I'm excited to watch you on this new journey because I think there's a lot of alignment between what we've been working on and what you're working towards. And so I think it'll be fun to watch. I mean, you're producing a ton of content. I can't keep up with all of it,
No
but
one
it'll be
can.
fun.
But I actually don't care about that because like I'm just trying to learn, and if the content's useful to people, I'll put it
Yeah.
out there. And if it's not, I don't care, because it's like the exhaust from the journey, but really it's about the
Right.
learning and the relationships. So
Yeah, that's awesome. So
yeah.
I'm excited about this new chapter and to see how it unfolds for you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
guys.
you.
Well,
This was awesome.
yeah, so nice to catch up with you. Speaking of kids, now I'm going to break and go pick up my kid at school and off to sports practice. So,
Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
about to do the same thing.
all right, guys.
Fantastic.
Well, nice to catch up. Next time, let's do it sooner than several years from now.
Sounds
That's
good,
great.
Jason. Great to talk.
Okay, take it easy.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to The Next. If you enjoyed it, you can subscribe from your favorite podcast player. In addition to the podcast, which typically publishes weekly, there's also a weekly newsletter on Substack at thenextnext.substack.com. That's essentially for weekly accountability of the ground I'm covering, areas I'm tackling next, and where I could use some help as well. And it's a great area to foster discussion and dialogue around the topics that we cover on the show. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.